Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. We just want to bring the brothers back. We'll give the brothers a minute or so to come back. Assalamu alaikum. So we'll continue, inshallah. So before moving on, we wanted to make sure that we got some principles. Before continuing on with the text, we wanted to make sure that we got some important principles when it comes to the minhaj, يعني منهج التوصل للحكم الشرعي. What's the methodology for reaching, or what's the methodology for arriving at a ruling in the Sharia? And we'll give a basic framework. First of all, there are two types of knowledge. One is that which is transmitted, and one is reason. And both are used in understanding the deen. Each has its place. And so we were saying, some of you just came on, that we want to kind of leave with a framework before continuing on with Bidayat al-Mujtahid, so that we kind of have a grasp of what was done and what type of mindset should we have in studying the Quran and the Sunnah. And one of the issues is that we have to have a minhaj that allows us to understand how it is that the scholars arrive at a ruling in the Sharia, but not only at a ruling in the Sharia, at understanding. So one of the issues is that, first of all, we have to determine what the source of knowledge is. Is it a matter of knowledge which is pertaining to revelation or transmission, or is it a matter of knowledge which is relating to intellect or reason? And so after that's said and done, when we talk about understanding the Quran and Sunnah, we have to determine the text that we're dealing with. If we're dealing with the Quran and the Sunnah, then the issue becomes we have to determine what ahadith, what ayat of the Quran, what ahadith pertain to the issue. Then we have to look at the language. What's the level of clarity? Is it clear cut, or does it vary? Is it open to different understandings? So that comes to the issue of understanding the meaning. Once we get beyond the phase of the authenticity of the text, clarity of the text, and we know what it means, then we get into the issue of whether there is another text which appears to contradict it. And I think in these cases that we studied in Bidayat al-Mujtahid so far, we dealt with both issues of the issue of clarity and the issue of seemingly contradictory texts. And we see how that opened up the discussion on the issue of the number of obligations of the prayer, and on a daily basis, how many prayers do we have to pray, and on the issue of what do we do with a person who is not praying but doesn't negate the obligation of Salah, and when they're commanded to pray, they refuse to. We see how the scholars looked at these evidences that pertain to these discussions, and we've seen how one of the issues that came up was the issue of language. One of the issues that came up was the issue of contradictory or conflicting narrations, what appears to be. And so we go into more detail with all of these issues as we proceed on in our studies. But that's something that we have to understand. What is the source of knowledge? What is the clarity, right, of the text that we're dealing with? And then does it have, an opposing text? Is there another text to oppose it to give another meaning? And another issue that was brought up, but not in a lot of detail, was the issue of abrogation. So if we have a text of the Quran and the Sunnah, if we determine the meaning, we still have to look at the fact that is there a contradictory text to give us an opposing understanding? And can we act upon it? Meaning, is it abrogated or not? So those are some of it when we talk about, handling or dealing with evidences in the detailed sense, not in the sense of a source of knowledge, like the Quran is a source of knowledge, but a specific ayat which pertains to a particular situation, or specific, not the Sunnah as a source of knowledge, but a specific hadith which pertains to a particular situation. Once we get beyond all of that, we're still dealing with the issue of language. We're still dealing with the issue of, is there another contradictory evidence that will challenge our ability to practice the hadith? And we're still dealing with the issue, can we even act upon it? So those are some of the things that I wanted to close off with in leaving and ending the class here. And what comes up next is still a discussion on issues of Usul Fiqh, on issues of Qiyas. But I wanted to end at this point because I think that if we're able to get these concepts, we're in a good place. We're in a good place as far as understanding what it is that we're confronting when we start talking about, well, show me the evidence. It's a process that has to be undertaken to work with the evidence. It's not just an issue of give me the dalil. That's a beginning stage, but that's not the stage of the ulama and the people of ilm. That's the stage of the people who want to have support for what they are dealing with, and they're content with that. That's it. But the stage of the ulama or scholars and people of knowledge in general is not only that you show me that there's a hadith to support what you're doing, but you have to show me that you really understand that hadith and the fiqh of the hadith, and that there's no other position out there, right? And especially if someone is claiming that there's only this way and not any other way, so it's a more systematized process. I hope that that's clear. So we'll take questions and then we'll come to an end. So are there any questions that are left? Can someone summarize a little bit? What were the main points? The issue of what do I recommend with regard to following a madhab or studying a madhab, that issue, it comes up quite often. One of the things which is fundamental is to study in a systematized way. The reality of the Usul Fiqh discussions is that they're not separate from systematized fiqh or the madhab, or even systematized non-madhab approach, because there's such a thing as a systematized non-madhabi approach. which is trying to revive the way of the scholars of hadith and so on and so forth, that are looking at they're working directly with the evidences, and they're that doesn't mean that the madhahib are not, but the fiqh of hadith approach is there, you can't deny it. And you have Subhi Saleh, who compiled the fiqh of the book in the Sunnah, which is published by Dar es Salaam. You have Al Wajiz by Sheikh Al Badawi. You have Fiqh Al Sunnah. You have Minhaj Al Muslim. All of those books, they use principles, but it's not the traditional madhab approach. So at the end of the day, Usul al-Fiqh comes back to teaching us that the madhahib have methodologies. Just like we learned today, the majority, meaning the Malikis, the Shafi'is, the Hanbalis, and the Hanafis, they take a position on issues. So here, by studying applied Usul al-Fiqh, what we're doing is we're getting a grasp of the methodologies that will enlighten us as to how to study fiqh. I'm of the position that, you should be studying basics in fiqh, but at the same time, in today's time period, we need some grounding in Usul al-Fiqh so that we appreciate what's going on. When you're exposed to the discussions in Usul al-Fiqh, even if you don't understand 100%, you begin to have an appreciation of what the madhahib did. But if you don't have a grasp of Usul al-Fiqh, you really don't have an appreciation of what the madhahib did, because you don't see the necessity for it, or you don't understand what they did, so you don't really appreciate it, and you're just following, and that's it, because someone said follow a madhab. We're about to pray in a few minutes. So that's the issue, that the discussion of the madhab really comes back to the issue of curriculum. We talked about this many times. One of the issues of telling people to follow a madhab, look at the stuff that comes up in Bidayat al-Mujtahid. It's stuff which is, in this society, if people hear this type of stuff without having any context, look at what we covered about the issue of executing a person if they're not praying to Salah. In this time period and in this society, if that's not properly contextualized, it can create problems for people. And so the madhahib, one of the best things, if people are going to study the madhahib, which is highly recommended by many scholars, that they should study contemporary books. Contemporary books first, then get into the tradition. That way you learn how to practice with ease and facility. The language is clear. There's not a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of books that have been written like that in today's time, in all of the different madhabs. And the problem in the English language is that we still have a deficiency in these things. And so that's kind of my take. The madhahib have their benefit, but the madhahib are not the only thing to study, and there's not only one way to study a madhab. The thing is to be committed to something at the end of the day. Ultimately, Usul al-Fiqh is said to be non-biased. Right? Once you study the outlines of Usul al-Fiqh, it gives you a grasp of how to deal with the madhab. And you understand. When the madhab is just, basically, either they're showing you the reasoning, or they're summarizing the reasoning of how they came to conclusion. Most of what people are studying is the summaries of what the scholars have said. They don't even know why the scholars came to those conclusions. We don't need to practice Islam in that way in today's time. That's for the beginning stage of knowledge. You just have a summary of what it is that the scholars said, and you practice that, so that you can have a foundation. But once you get beyond the basics, you need to understand how it is that they're coming to conclusions. You need to have a grasp of the deen. It gives you firmness in Islam. It gives you confidence in the scholarly approach. If not, what begins to happen is that people begin to have doubts, and they begin to doubt the Sunnah. they begin to doubt not only the Sunnah, they begin to say, well, these madhab, they contradict each other. It's just a bunch of opinions. This one is not on the Sunnah, that one is a bid'ah, this, that. And that's not what you want. You want people to understand the process. So I hope that kind of clarifies a little bit. And so here, this is not just a Usul al-Fiqh discussion too. This is the application of Usul al-Fiqh. So you see how that stuff is playing itself out. You get humbled pretty fast. You become humbled. It's not theoretical discussion in the air. You see how this stuff is applied. And so you become humbled pretty fast, in the sense of, wow, I have to have mastery of the Arabic language. Wow, I have to, be versant with the hadith. Wow, I have to be versant with the Quran. Wow, I should know where there's consensus. You become humbled pretty fast, and that's one of the benefits of reading this type of book. But at the same time that you're humbled, you're elevated, because Imam Ibn Rushd is elevating us and teaching us really how it is that scholars work through issues. But if there's not any more questions, we'll end with this, inshallah. Yeah, I told you, Arif, before too, in your region, the Hanafi madhab is dominant. But I would study the Hanafi madhab, along with Mishkat and along with Nasbur Rai, if I get to that point, which is basically really a strong study of the Hidayah and the hadith that are used in the Hidayah. I would in Fiqh al-Muyassir, which was recommended by Dr. Akram Nadwi, which actually is translated into the English language and is in Arabic, is written in clear Arabic. You can buy it at Al-Balagh bookstore. And it's contemporary in its approach. Or Fiqh al-Hanafi and its evidences. Contemporary books of fiqh is easier to deal with versus staying stuck with the older books. Contemporary books of fiqh usually have usul to them, hadith to them, contemporary discussions, and so on and so forth. And so, since there's no more questions, we end with that, inshallah. And the video should be uploaded. And we'll meet the next time, same place, inshallah. And we'll continue on in our group chatting, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa la asr inna al-insana fi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi.